This is Greg Troutwine with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Angeliki Zisimatou, the Director of Cybersecurity for ABS, to discuss the fast-evolving cybersecurity regulatory landscape in maritime, with insights on what it means for vessel owners, as well as classification's role in a solution. So, Angeliki, to start, can you provide a brief personal and professional background with insight on how you came to be the Director of Cybersecurity at ABS?
First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be here. I have been with ABS for the last 18 years. My background is naval architecture and marine engineering, so I'm not coming from an IT cybersecurity space by no means. However, I have been involved in the cybersecurity for operational technology the last 8 years of my career. It just happened that at that time, ABS decided to form a team to initiate the work on cybersecurity, something that I think we were pioneers as far as the class societies go. There was nothing as far as guidance and recommendations or regulations in the space at that time. So we drafted a guide that provided the recommendations and associated notations and requirements for marine and offshore structures. So this is how I started. I went out, performed cybersecurity assessments. For 3-4 years, I was heading cybersecurity operations with ABS Group as well. And I'm back with ABS Technology the last year and a half, responsible for cybersecurity developments, rules, guides, and regulations globally. And at the same time, I've been leading a panel with Ajax. So I'm the chair of the Safe Digital Transformation Panel, which is dealing with cybersecurity, with autonomy, complex systems, and data.
As you know, managing risk is common for every vessel owner, but cybersecurity is obviously climbing the risk ladder and its level of importance for all industries. From your experience and your conversations, can you put in perspective how big the cyber risk today is in maritime and generally classify if you see the industry being proactive or reactive in managing this risk?
So I will start by saying how many times during the last 8 years I have heard the phrase cybersecurity is a hoax. I have been hearing that again and again from crews, from operators, from owners. So they do think that there is no cyber risk at least in the beginning of this journey. Or there are no cyber risks because their systems on board are air-gapped, as they call them. So they think that there are no operational technology systems connected to the internet or to anything else, which makes them secure. Now, I know that does not really sound like a promising start, but over the years, things have evolved. So we've noticed a change in the attitude that typically is driven by regulation. And of course, the visibility to cybersecurity incidents, and Maersk was a good example. I must say that that the large fleet operators and owners are taking the cybersecurity risks seriously. So they are investing heavily into having their own secure operations centers, into having their own OT cybersecurity experts in their team. For the smaller and the medium operators and owners, I think that regulation is what is actually driving their actions. So they try to stick to the bare minimum, doing what is mandated or recommended by IMO at this point. And of course, what's going to be coming for the new construction vessels mandated by the Ajax requirements that are coming in effect, have already come in effect.
If you could generalize, when you look at the industry at large, what do you see as the biggest security gaps in maritime today in terms of cybersecurity?
So referring to what I just mentioned and the lack of knowledge on the topic, I would start by saying that the lack of training and awareness is pretty big. And that does not just apply to the crews, it applies to the onshore personnel. So even shipping companies that do know that they need to act, they assign the task to their IT department, and typically the IT personnel has no knowledge of the onboard systems. So they're facing with some challenges and they don't know where to start. So, and of course, we do have other challenges like legacy systems on board. Windows NT I've seen in some of the vessels, or all sorts of outdated software. Lack of visibility of the operational technology on board. So a number of operators who not really know what type of systems and they actually have. What are the components, the equipment on board? They are lacking a basic hardware and software inventory. And of course, remote connectivity becomes a huge challenge and a great issue, generally speaking, especially if once we move towards the remotely controlled systems or systems where the suppliers are asking for access for either a health or efficiency monitoring purposes. And then the lack of management, proper management of the whole supply chain. So typically you have the vendors who are coming on board, accessing the systems, doing updates, patches, whatever they are doing. The operators have very low visibility, they're very unclear of what is actually being done. It's like a black box to them. So there is a form that they're getting, if they do get it, at the end of the maintenance that's being performed. And apart from that, they don't know what happened. So that is also posing some other risks as to how those updates have been performed. Have you actually used a dedicated laptop? Like basic questions, which remain unanswered in most cases.
So those are some of the risks. Those are some of the things, some of the gaps that you see. What's your best advice for ship owners today? I guess for anyone watching this and who's interested to protect their business, what should they be doing now to protect themselves? And what are the consequences of not being vigilant?
So, Greg, I would start with the obvious. First of all, take it seriously. Consider it an actual risk to your operations and to your business. So follow what is mandated or what is recommended by IMO, what is recommended by NIST, Cybersecurity Framework. Follow the steps. Start with a very robust risk assessment. And I know that there is a lot of ambiguity as far as to what the risk assessment should be like. I have seen some risk assessments that are one line on a company's safety management system. And the question is, are there any cyber risks? No, everything is behind a lock cabinet or something like that. So take it seriously, put the right people in the room, and that would be both people who are coming from operations and know the systems very well, but also people from the IT side who know software very well, and brainstorm, really think of what your risks are and how to mitigate them. Most of the frameworks out there are pretty flexible. So the controls that need to be implemented are actually based on the identified risk. If your identification of risk is poor, well, the controls that you're going to be implemented are poor as well. So they go hand in hand, and that's where I say, just do the due diligence. Start with that, and then the rest of the things are going to fall into place.
You referenced the rules or the guidance coming down from IMO. The Coast Guard is obviously also formulating some new standards rules for the industry, and I know they're not complete yet. But from what you've seen, what you've heard, can you give insight on the possible material impact of vessel owners that these rules might have?
We provided some feedback to the Coast Guard as far as to what is potentially missing or potentially is going to be challenging for the operators. So one thing that has stood up, and maybe it's something that is not mentioned and we don't really know the intent, is whether the new regulation is going to apply to new construction vessels or to existing vessels as well. And that would have a huge impact to US flag vessels. There are some requirements within the proposed rule which talk about segmentation of networks, for example. Sometimes that, especially in existing vessels where the networks are typically flat, that would require some extra effort. And it really depends on the vessel, it depends on the networks on board, it depends on a number of factors, and that is an investment. There are other items as well, like cybersecurity drills every 3 months that is required within the regulation, which we think is a little bit too frequent. And then there are no specifics on what does that mean, what needs to be tested. So we have recommended to the Coast Guard also taking into consideration what Ajax has proposed as far as new construction vessels, how to address the whole supply chain from the design, commissioning, construction, and operational life of a vessel, but also how Ajax has approached the specific controls, who is responsible for what, providing a little bit more clarity on what class needs to do, what the owner needs to do, what a shipyard needs to do as far as actions. So I'm waiting to see the regulation coming out, and I'm sure that the Coast Guard has received plenty of comments that they're working on right now. But I'm very eager to see that, and then I think it's going to have a huge impact, especially if later on we go down a path where there's going to be more and more regulation that's going to be coming from other flag administrations based on what the Coast Guard has set out.
Vessel owners are increasingly swamped with fast evolving technology and new regulation, whether that regulation is regarding decarbonization or cybersecurity. You referenced it briefly in your last answer, but what exactly is the role of classification in helping vessel owners to efficiently, effectively navigate these changes?
So I know that everybody has been focused on decarbonization. I do want to point out that decarbonization and cybersecurity are not independent challenges. They're linked aspects of modern maritime operations. So if you think about decarbonization, it often involves the adoption of new technologies. So that can introduce new cybersecurity vulnerabilities if not managed correctly. I'm not going to get into the details of that. I just wanted to point that out. What I want to say is that the class has gotten away from being a pure regulatory body. We are here to become the client's trusted advisor. So we're getting questions again and again of where do I start? What do I need to do? And that I think is the biggest role that we play right now. And of course, from the regulatory aspect, getting in touch with the rest of the regulatory organizations, like having active involvement in IMO, having active involvement with Ajax, and of course, providing feedback to the Coast Guard, discussing with MPA Singapore and the rest of the flag administrations, and trying to come up with something that is implementable and make sense for the industry. It does not make sense to ask for controls and ask for mitigation actions that would apply to a more mature industry as far as the cybersecurity space. We face a challenge as far as maturity, so we start with a little bit more of a phased approach, starting with the basics, and then move on to the next step and the next step. So that's what we are here to do, and I hope we're doing effectively.